So you guys probably know this already, but League's lore is kind of massive, like insanely large. After all, Runeterra's been around for over 10 years now, and over that time, Riot has changed a lot of stuff that was already established to make way for new stories. However, that's left the lore with a lot of inconsistencies, so let's talk about them. Starting with the Nexus arc and going through the end of the Ionia arc. Along the way, we'll talk about some of our ideas for the plot holes and questions that come up along the way. At first, a lot of people were theorizing that Nexus would use hemomantic mages to keep Darius' arm working, but that's not what happened. Riot didn't even give a proper explanation. Still, we do know that there are descendants of the Iceborn scattered across many regions in Runeterra. For those who don't know, in League there's true ice, which is ice that never melts and that freezes anything it touches. Or at least that's how it's supposed to work. But then we have the Iceborn, who are able to resist true ice. So we can probably guess that some ancestor of Darius was an Iceborn and passed those genes down. That's why Darius was able to withstand the true ice effect that transferred from the axe to him when he grabbed it to smash Trundle's head. Keep in mind though that it wasn't easy, and he was in rough shape after the fight with Trundle. In LeBlanc's short story Everywhere and Everyone, Darius is inside a tent swearing while covered in a bunch of furs trying to warm up, even sitting near a fire, but still feeling super cold and feverish. And it's worth noting that being descended from an Iceborn doesn't make you just shrug off true ice like nothing. It just gives you a far greater resistance and tolerance to cold compared to a normal person. Sejuani herself, one of the strongest Iceborn in all of Runeterra, isn't even immune. One time while she was hunting a mammoth with her tribe, she grabbed the true ice part of her weapon and drove it straight into the mammoth's heart. As she did so, she felt a crazy cold burn in her arm and nearly wrecked her whole wrist because of it. Her fingers immediately turned super dark and curled up, and she felt excruciating pain, just like Darius did. So yeah, we're pretty certain that Darius has Iceborn ancestry. Now, could Draven have it too? Maybe, who knows? Have you ever thought about him spinning 2 true ice axes? That would be sick. Before we keep going, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and consider becoming a member. You'll get access to some really cool perks like picking video topics or getting early access to videos. Well, it makes zero sense that the mortal Mordekaiser would straight up knock out a full demon just by swinging a physical weapon, especially since Kadashi Lee, general of Sanuzal's army, trying to protect his lord after he'd been injured, literally charged at Otacon trying to cut his head off, and his sword just straight up breaks. He tries to hit Otacon again, but ends up getting wrecked. His other sword gets blocked and broken, and he dies from the attack he takes. Then Sanuzal shows up pissed and swings a medieval mace on Otacon's head, knocking him out instantly. Some people will try to say that it's justifiable because it was the Nightfall, but it wasn't. Nightfall, which is Mordekaiser's current weapon, was only created after he was resurrected by taking the souls of the sorcerers who tried to control him, forging a worthy weapon that alludes to the weapon he used most in his time alive. Of course, even back then, he already had knowledge, forbidden artifacts, and slaves from his conquests. So much so that right after his general dies, we see Sanuzal witnessing a group of witches, including LeBlanc, fusing Kadashi Lee's soul with Otacon. That ends up creating a demon totally controlled by Sanuzal, massively boosting his military power. Knowing that, it could be that Sanuzal's mace was enchanted by the witches, or maybe that it was made from some runic iron, like Riven's sword, but there's no proof of that in the comic. And a demon should never be hurt by a normal weapon, even if it's manifested in the physical plane. So we're left with 2 possible conclusions. Either Riot messed up with this logic and just wanted to show how strong Mordekaiser was, and kinda ignored the demon rules and aura stuff, or his mace had some kind of arcane property that is capable of injuring Otacon. This one here is super interesting. To start answering this question, we gotta go back to the animated motion comic The Demon's Hand, where right at the beginning we see Otacon free, walking towards what looks kind of like a grave in the snow, probably the remains of a warrior who died in a violent conflict. And it seems the negative energy from that fight is still present and lingering there, so much so that Otacon starts feeding on it. After that, we see him traveling through a bunch of different places across Runeterra. Remember that Otacon is drawn to places of intense violence, bloodshed, bloodshed and carnage. That's what led him to Sanuzal's camp in the first place. Now, taking into account that Mordekaiser's story happens after the Darken War, we can definitely say that Otacon was in Ionia, and that's all because of the Darken invasion in the First Lands. A ton of blood was spilled there over the years, since every Darken formed an army of followers to serve them, and chaos spread across the First Lands because of it. The motion comic Yunara the Devoted Shrine Maiden shows that chaos, and that history is further elaborated on in another motion comic called Trials of Twilight: The Truth. In that motion comic, Yunara says that the Kinku resistance was basically on the verge of collapse. They were heavily outnumbered and their enemies were way too strong. Just when all hope seems lost, the tide changed when Zahin arrived. Anyway, it was really weird that Otacon knew about the Twilight Temple and Zahin's existence, right? So my guess is that during the first war of the False Kanmei, which is what we call the Darken invasion now, Otacon probably had some really bizarre banquets. My theory is that Otacon absorbs knowledge and memories from his victims, so if at some point he ended up consuming a Kinku who knew about the Twilight Temple, he could probably have learned about Zahin sealing himself away. Now, I just don't remember exactly what triggered that second wave of hypergrowth that happened in Ionia. The first one I believe was because of the presence of the Darken. The second one, I don't remember if it was caused by LeBlanc to purposely make the veils between realms stay connected, since, you know, we saw that the plan was to lure Yunara out of there so they could break through the defenses and then return to the temple in the spirit realm. Either way, another question that got left hanging was what Yunara would have been able to do if LeBlanc hadn't attacked her in the animated cinematic Twilight's End. You can see that she was managing to hold back Otacon and injure him, and at one point focus shifts to the sky, showing some kind of void or something like that. I think Yunara was going to try to push Otacon into that void, since she was sort of weakening him with her attacks and suspending him. As for Zahin, I think they were going to try to find a way to separate him from Otacon by cutting the demon's arm off, probably with Xin Zhao's Petricite spear or something. Alright, let's go. As far as we know, Darken can't exactly talk or move around normally. Their imprisonment is almost like being conscious in a coma. The only way a Darken can contact a mortal is through projecting feelings and emotions. For example, Jural, the Darken sealed inside his own shield back at Fortis' house, where he was watched over for generations and kept secret. His melancholia was so strong that it sounded like crying to Lady Fortis' son, which made the kid feel pity and touch the shield. Darken can sense the presence of those around them, so they know when there's a potential host that might let them escape their prison. That's true for all of them. In the motion comic The Truth, we saw Zahin intervening and helping Xin Zhao during the trial he was going through, telling him that taking on the power of a Darken by wielding it isn't the answer or the way. Later on, when Xin Zhao touched the glaive, we saw Zahin in his human form in some kind of memorial plain that looked like the desert of Shurima. And like, he was chill, man. Unlike other Darken who basically stuck in total darkness and can't move, Zahin seemed to have no such issues. Most Darken report feeling like they used to have limbs like arms and legs, knowing what it was like to breathe with lungs, feel warmth on their skin and stuff like that, but having none of that. So maybe the seal worked differently on Zahin because he stayed mostly whole, even though he feared going insane like his kin did. After all, he knew how the seal works thanks to what was passed on to him by the aspect of Twilight, Maisha. Since he wasn't completely crazy like the other Darken, that could explain why he was more calmed in his sealed state. Now, Xin Zhao's death is something that bothers and unsettles a lot of people, because what we expected was something more like Cain and Rost, but in an even better way. You can even excuse it by saying he was dying, since it shows Otacon impaling him with his arm, but screw it. He was dying. Hemomancy can heal his body. It restored him when Zahin took over, didn't it? And remember how Varus did the same thing with one of his hosts who had been mortally wounded, using Hemomancy to rebuild Kai's and Valmar's body into a physically perfect vessel? So why did Xin Zhao die and not end up in some kind of brotherhood with Zahin? Or at least have some spirit with him like a voice? Simple storytelling. Riot wanted impact and something new. And you guys remember how crazy it was back during the Sentient Waters event when they killed Gangplank and he became unavailable in the game? In a way, it's the same thing they tried with Xin Zhao. Like, closing the door on certain champions opens up ways to tell someone else's story. Did it make sense in the lore? No, not at all. After all, Xin Zhao has way more willpower than Valmar and Kai. And even so, when Varus reforged their two bodies into a single entity, he still couldn't get rid of their spirits. They're constantly arguing inside him, kind of like Ben 10 with Alien X. The Varus comic itself shows this, and in the end, because this strength of Valimar and Kai's love, Varys actually loses control of the body. So what does that mean? Can he stay in control for longer periods? Yes, but he can still be overpowered if the couple fully commits to overriding his will. So it would make even more sense for him to keep Xin Zhao alive in some way. But hey, that's just how it goes. The most powerful beings in Runeterra are the rioters who write the script. So if they say Xin Zhao dies, he dies. One question that I think got asked 2 or 3 times during the Ionia season was, where was the Eye of Twilight? In this case, Shin. If I remember correctly, I think it was the motion comic The Truth that Kinnan said that Shin and Mayim, who is Akali's mother and is the current Fist of Shadow of the Kinku Order, were on a mission somewhere really far away and wouldn't be able to return in time. Maybe they couldn't even be contacted about the current situation. Man, Runeterra really needs cell phones, right? I saw some people saying that certain champions' abilities reflect powers they actually use in the lore. So where was Shin's teleport ultimate then? In the animation Tales of Runeterra, The Lesson, we see Shin teleporting right next to Akali. That's the closest we've seen him use something like his ult. So maybe the range isn't as massive as League gameplay makes it look. Also, Kinnan definitely knew exactly where Shin was with Mayim. And the guy is a Yordle, man. He could have used portal magic and gone to them to explain what was happening and bring them back. But fine, Riot gave that excuse, so let's think about it. What the hell could Shin have been doing then? In my view, he was probably dealing with some balance issues involving the spirit realm, but I seriously doubt he was outside Ionia. His job doesn't involve traveling around fixing the spiritual balance of other lands after all. In the end, Riot was like, stop asking questions, and just threw out a random excuse to move on with the story. They probably didn't want to involve more characters in the plot, so the story could just focus only on Kinnan, Xin Zhao, and Yunara. But what I found strange was when I rewatched the dialogue at the end of the minigame, The Battle of Koshin, Kinnan clearly says that he did talk to Shin while Xin Zhao was busy dealing with those demons. But then he's completely shocked to see that Yunara is no longer at her post. He even says he never considered that something like that could happen. Fine, up to that point, okay. But why not contact Shin again? Did he forget how to dial the spirit hotline? Or was whatever Shin was dealing with really that much more important? Because what was happening there was a massive imbalance, a full-scale calamity for Ionia. It involved a Darkin. Shin must have been handling something insanely serious for Kinnan not to reach out to him again, and instead assume that he, the former Fist of Shadow, and Xin Zhao could handle it on their own. And now that I think about it, Kinnan did say Shin was very, very far away, and that it would take him time to arrive, right? So was Shin operating on another layer of the spirit realm, dealing with some kind of gigantic crisis? If he needed Akali's mother's help, then it's very possible this wasn't a simple job at all. But that's basically it. I'll see you guys in the next video.